Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 188. Excuse me while I do my little bit of boomer tech. Yes, I'm sure it's going to start shortly. Hopefully. Oh, dead air, right? Why has it not started? This is weird. Oh, there we go. I believe that Horus is going to be joining us as a special guest this evening, shortly. How are you going today, gentlemen?
Not too bad.
Okay, well, I think because of Horus is going to be joining us, people will have noted the controversy, if that's the right word, over Winston Churchill and what have you on Twitter this week, which all started after Tucker Carlson did that interview with the historian dude, who simply told the truth about Winston Churchill, in my humble opinion. But I'm not a big fan. But I dare say when Horus joins us, we'll probably talk a little bit about that. Did either of you two gents have a first subject you wanted to start us off with this evening?
I was going to sort of talk about another interview or debate on Twitter that happened the other day between Lawrence Fox and Steve Laws. That was sort of...
Oh, yeah, I did see some of that. Yep.
Yeah, that's quite significant because
Go for it.
Yeah, so there was a it's been uploaded. If people want to watch it and aren't on Twitter or something, you can go on YouTube. It's been uploaded, I think, a few times, and it's essentially a debate which started from a Twitter thread between Steve Laws and Lawrence Fox over English identity and whether or not Lawrence Fox believes that any person who comes to this country, as long as they hold British values, whatever that is, can be English. And Steve Laws rightfully says that no, this English identity isn't like a universalist term. It's actually specific to a group of people, like any ethnic identity is. And so this was the crux of the debate, and it broke down into civic nationalists against regular nationalists in general. Now, of course, both of them didn't accept those terms because they didn't view themselves as civic nationalists, and as Steve Laws says, well, there is no such thing as civic nationalism. It's just fake nationalism. So it's it's sort of as clear cut as that. And fundamentally, I would say, I think overall, Lawrence Fox, Steve Laws didn't really have to say anything. It was Lawrence Fox who showed himself up, and the one sort of takeaway from it was he basically said, on the space, he was happy for 95%, in a hypothetical 95% of the British public to become Black Africans as long as they hold British values. And he's which is, I mean, for me, was kind of like the end of the discussion, because I mean, well, there you go. That you don't care about this country. You don't care.
Basically, he's in favour of Britain being lost as a recognised. Yeah, that would amount to Britain being lost as a country.
Yeah, and what makes it a funny thing is, because of that particular statement, this was towards the end where he was doing a Q&A from other viewers watching. There's Steve Laws and Lawrence Fox questions, and I think it was from a mutual of mine, Hatfield, I believe his name is, and good fella. Lawrence Fox showed himself up, never, indeed, and
Yeah, no,
he
I'm
was,
looking at the chart. Yeah,
he, Lawrence Fox, basically, I mean, his whole tactic was to be what was Morgoth would call the hatchling. He pretended he didn't understand the definition of what an English person is. What is when did mass immigration happen? Because he started conflating people who arrived from the West Indies and Africa, in Asia, in post World War II, to the Normans arriving, or the Anglo-Saxons, and then he was like, "Oh, what's an Anglo-Saxon?" So I mean, it was absolutely, I mean, it was just utter liberal. I mean, it was just basic bitch liberal bollocks that was on display, and I think because of that statement about the Africans and 95%, he has lost. I've noticed there've been people in the last few days since that who've been coming out and saying, "Oh, I've supported Lawrence Fox, but now after that statement, I can't get behind him." So he has ultimately shown himself up to be basically just a total fraud. And as someone said in chat to you, there was the Reclaim, I think his was the Reclaim Party. He and what he did was he deceived many people who were on the right of things at the time, especially during his London mayoral campaign, and he took a lot of money from them, and he's basically shown up to be a complete fraud and grifter. And that was something Laws raised with him. You said that amount of money that could have been used for a genuine cause, the genuine cause, a nationalist cause in this country.
it was
And,
like 5
and
million or something, wasn't it?
it was, and look at what he's done with it, and then look at what he's done in itself. I mean, he's just it is just another display of what happens. How many treacherous little worms and fraudsters that you get in our space, and that is, I mean, that is a depressing thing in it all in itself. But I mean, overall, the only good thing that takeaway is, I
It's
think
true.
this whole debate has done damage to Fox among his own supporters.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'd watched some of it. I didn't watch all of it, but I did watch some of it. And I like Steve Laws. Like, I follow him on Twitter. He's a good dude. So, yeah, for sure. But, I mean, the answer to these people who try and conflate all these people like the Huguenots and the Normans, and some of them will even try and do it with the Anglo-Saxons, for God's sake, who, are the basic English people, and also quite a lot of Lowland Scots are Anglo-Saxon as well. But the thing is, the Celts, the Anglo-Saxons, the Danes, the Normans, and even the Huguenots, who were the Protestant French, of course, were all very, very closely related Northwest Europeans, all of them.
Yeah, I mean,
so there's no comparison whatsoever with Somalians and Indians and all these other bloody people,
Yeah, it's like Nigel Farage, for example. He's of a Huguenot stock, and he says like his family line.
Well, Farage's got Huguenot ancestry.
Yeah,
Lady of Shalott, everyone knows Lady of Shalott in our circle. She's got Huguenot ancestry.
Yeah, I was going to say, Nigel Farage, he changes his surname to like the French-German border. Now, and it's like, I don't like. There's this little map where it's just like a small circle of like. So basically, Brittany to central Norway. That's like the extent of British genetics. But they're going to use that to go, oh, well, you got invaded by the Normans 1,000 years ago. Therefore, you need to open up your borders to Somalis and Pakistanis and whatnot. So,
yeah, and the thing though is, and Mitch, you probably heard it in the debate as well. Iron Duke is that excuse me, Lawrence Fox and his supporters that were present during all this, their argument was, well, if all these people coming in were Christian, that would be enough to create moral unity in the country. Now, again, going back to history, if you look at the St. Brice's Day massacre, which happened, I think it was 1002, and it was when Ethelred the Unready had ordered. You had the order of the killing of Danish communities in England. Bearing in mind at this point they would have been both nominally Christian, and also if we go along the Anglo-Saxons and the Danes, I mean brethren from the same region, right? So even in that sort of realm of the argument that he was drawing from, even then those two sides couldn't live together, even though that they were brethren and everything. And it was clear ethnic, and there was political motives, but there's clear ethnic motives as well behind it. So, and so the idea that, well, if we're just all Christian, there's going to be this moral unity is absolute nonsense, and it's the same nonsense you hear. I think you hear by some in America, like what was it, like the Christian nationalist stuff, and it isn't, because it's not the religion, it's actually the ethnicity and what the baggage that comes with that, the way that people behave. And of course, in Lauren Fox's view, and many people in his sort of circles, they don't believe that there is inherent characteristics within groups that, well, we can all be the same, and this was something that Steve Laws was trying to get to him to say when he was using hypotheticals of, if you have a town of French people, and then you have down the road like a town of Africans, you can't, but both Christian or something, both Roman Catholic, there will still be a notable difference in behavior and how which community behaves differently, and that would affect the wider society.
For sure.
I mean, for example, the Caribbean and the Nigerian immigrants who've come to the UK are largely Christian. They're either Protestant, Anglican, or Roman Catholic. So that, I mean, the whole argument itself falls apart immediately because they haven't integrated.
No, not at all. Welcome to Horus and Atman. Horus, I know you streamed with Steve Laws before now, so did you have anything you wanted to say about this?
Yeah, I dipped in and out of that debate. I think he made it look quite easy, really. And Steve is not someone who's like studied these things. He's more sort of instinctual, isn't he? But it was still easy. But Lawrence Fox is pretty dim, I think. And the stuff he was coming out with he was using that hatchling tactic that Morgoth has described of pretending not to know what you mean by this and that. and his arguments were risible. I mean, but all right, let's imagine Britain that it's now 95% any other race or any other ethnic group or any other religion, whatever. The idea that the values float freely from any group of people is just ludicrous. And I also don't agree with just sort of the idea that race and ethnicity doesn't matter anyway. Even besides the values question, but yeah, the idea that somehow the values can and should be just sort of carried over to a new group. Why do that anyway? And also, it's just not true. Of course, they're not. Like, you can see that happening when you could,
and you can't.
Yeah, and there's no reason to. You could see even when there was only sort of 5% other ethnicities in the country, that a whole load of them. Some of them do. There's the odd Caribbean person who's like married into a white family, or whatever. But as groups, and the more numerous they are, the less reason they have to try and integrate. Why should they? Why should they even learn the language? If the stations are going to start being named in other languages,
you can
public
go to
services can be provided in.
You can go to large parts of British towns, Horus. You can go to large parts of British towns, whether it be London or Birmingham or quite a lot of former industrial cities in the north of England, where there are such high proportions of immigrants, they've got no reason to integrate whatsoever, because they dominate those areas.
Yeah, it's a foreign colony. Like, I live not that far from Whitechapel, and that is a foreign colony. It's just they've got no reason to even learn the language. I'm talking about people who've been born.
Yeah.
Why should they? What's the point?
Mate, I was born on the south side of the river, you know, and I used to go across to Whitechapel. I had girlfriends from that area, and like when I was a young man, it was nowhere near as bad as it is now. But you could see immigration starting to come in.
Yeah. I mean, most people, given the I mean, I think this applies to, you know, white Europeans as well. Like, given the choice abroad, they're going to establish a colony. They're going to gravitate to people like them because it's easier, because it's more comfortable, it's familiar. Like, familiarity has a certain value. It's not just a feeling, right? And I've seen it abroad. I've seen like little, you know, a little Swedish town here and there in Asia and stuff like that. You know, a tiny, you know, one little road or something, but. Yeah, they want the familiarity of it. They want to mutually supply each other with imported things as well. Also, there's just no reason to integrate. But Lawrence Fox is just dealing in imaginary, completely abstract concepts, like what sort of people who used to call themselves rationalists, or like, you know, those militant atheists. Same sort of thing they used to do. They're not interested in talking about the actual phenomenon of life. They're just talking about they're isolating concepts and exchanging them in their minds in logical ways, but that are cut off from reality. Like, obviously, right? Just dumb. Lawrence Fox is a joke. And what the hell happened to that 5 mil?
No,
I heard
totally
it was 7 mil as well.
Yep.
What happened to that money? Dodgy bastard.
Well, I've already went.
If it was one of us had that sort of money, I think we'd be under investigation.
This is it.
Really? Jesus.
And smart people could do a hell of a lot with 7 million.
Yeah, Jeremy Hoskin, who gave him a money. Matthew Trains, who, you know, like someone like Brendan Adam could just have a 5-minute conversation with him, and Bob's your uncle. Now you've got 7 million going to Steve. But now it has to go to Lee Lawrence instead.
I mean, it's like he was paid to be
nowhere with his mayoral campaign.
He got a risible amount
anywhere with that mayoral campaign. Yeah, that arse city can't still won, you know. But I don't know. Alan, did you have anything you wanted to say about the Steve Laws Lawrence Fox debate?
No, I think Steve Laws did very well. As Horus said, you know, he's not. He's quite an instinctual actor. And when Lawrence Fox kept going back to the Huguenots point for like the 3rd time, I was like, oh, is this what this is going to be now? Just keep circling back to it, and we're just going to be stuck in this loop. But then, even then, Laws just managed to outmaneuver him on a topic that I think Laws just has never cared enough to really look into anyway, because he just rightfully sees it as rather unimportant. And yeah, the amount of times in that where Steve Laws would just ask like a fairly simple hypothetical, and Lawrence Fox would essentially just snatch the mic and dive into a pit of sharks, you know, figuratively speaking, and just have himself flayed was quite. It was almost disconcerting, you know. Part of the way through, I was kind of sitting there thinking, like, is this the most elaborate psyop we've ever come across? Is this guy just profoundly stupid?
He's obviously got. He
easily lost the debate. I'm sorry, he easily lost the debate. Lawrence Fox. I mean, like Steve Laws won hands down. There's no doubt of that.
I've got a bit of a delay here, so I'm just going to reconnect. All right, I'll be back in a minute.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, and
I think I'm going to have to do that.
I mean,
a second as well. People can play. I'm on absolute dog of a computer. And I just can't afford to replace it at the moment because no one's giving me £5 million. So, you know. So
interesting
if someone
enough,
gave me £5 million, the first thing I do is get a new computer.
See, Iron Duke. Interesting enough, I was actually looking at a map of the Huguenots, like the population of Huguenots in France before they were evicted, and interesting enough that they mainly centres of populated were in the the regions of Aquitaine and Burgundy and around that sort of area, which is means that genetically they're more sort of Gallic Roman stock. They are more of Gothic and Burgundian stock, and also Alans. And Alans being from the steppes, you're going into Indo-Aryan. So Aryan immigration to England is, of course, based and allowed. So
yeah, it's like you have the Hugo. I know it was like 50,000 over the space of 5 years in the midst of the 17th century, which our population was like what 6 million, something like that. I can't remember what the population was in the reign of Charles II, but that's kind of the time when they came.
Yeah, about 6 million.
Yeah, and also it's like Swedish shiplips use this argument because between Sweden's foundation under like Ragnar Lothbrok in the Viking era up to like the Social Democrats have like been dominant amidst of the Cold War and whatnot. The only immigration Sweden really had was Huguenots, and Swedish shitlibs are basically using that to go, oh well, we took in Huguenots, therefore Sweden should just take in the entire third world into Malmo and Gothenburg and Stockholm and so on. So it's not just us; it's the Germans also took in a lot of Huguenots. Forget the guy. I forget the guy's. I think his name was Adolf Galland, who was a famous fighter race on the German side.
Yeah,
and you had like plenty of. Yeah, it's like there were plenty of like Huguenots as well involved in the Prussian younger class. So the Huguenots went all over the place. And
quite a few went to the the emerging 13 colonies and Canadian colonies as well. Particularly, but where I'm around here, there's a village which has a high portion of Huguenot descent because of you have odd surnames around here, which are I guess you could say Francofied, but then Anglofied, Francofied names, a bit like your Farage and stuff.
Well, even Nigel Farage has said mass immigration to the UK must end now. And, he means legal immigration as well as illegal. So Nigel Farage, who everyone calls a moderate, has actually gone further than Lawrence Fox was willing to go. So,
Am I coming through all right? Is there not too much of a delay?
No.
Cool.
You sound good.
No, you'll find, mate. It might be me because this is a poxy computer. It could be my delay rather than yours.
One thing I picked up on was
Adam, did you have a first subject?
Oh, sorry. Carry
on.
All right, just quick. I picked up on Fox repeatedly using the phrase "mass uncontrolled immigration" as what he's against. That is always the sign of someone who's basically trying to sort of diffuse our side, right? And he, I don't know if he said it on the debate, but he pointing out, one of the dangers of immigration is that it brings in the Palestine protesters. Right, so he's very, very he's very rerouting you back to the sort of Zio nationalism of Tommy Robinson, maybe like a little bit more polite or whatever. Not even that polite, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just like, it's bad because it's bad for our greatest ally or whatever. And he just fits right into that anti-woke thing, which has always been a kind of containment. It's not patriotic. It's not genuinely right-wing. It's not genuinely about fighting the left. It's centre-left itself. It's about sort of catching you in a net and going, don't go any further. That's what Spiked have always been about. Brendan O'Neill and all that. That's what like Calvin Robinson probably. It's safe. It's deliberately safe, sanitized stuff. Like keep away from real nationalism.
Yeah, they're all very, very similar. These people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he straight up said that because he ended up lording over the the Hindus and the Sikhs.
These people are all very, very similar.
And
if I had my way, the only immigration Britain would have would be like if someone was an Australian or a New Zealander or perhaps a Canadian, people like that, fine, we can take a few of those.
No, we might have Lebanese coming in.
They're ethnically the same as we are. What's that? Sorry, what did you say there?
I'd be more worried about the Lebanese Australians coming in.
What did you say?
I'm worried about the Lebanese Australians coming in.
Oh yeah, no. When I'm saying when I'm saying Australians or New Zealanders or Canadians, I do mean like Anglo-Celtic, European, Australians and New Zealanders and Canadians. You know.
Councilman, you had something to say, didn't you?
Admin, did you have a first subject for this evening?
Maybe. I got.
I don't think so.
I got quite sick at the event.
You're there. I can hear you.
I keep having to mute myself because I'm coughing constantly. It was a super spreader event. I think putting all the anti-vaxxers in one place was a bad move. I don't know if anyone has seen this story, and I'm not really sure how true it is just yet. There's this story of this young woman who had counter-terrorism police come to her house. Has anyone seen this?
Yes, I have. Yeah, it was over like a Saxon helmet, but she then said it was a Roman helmet.
On, do tell us.
So what it looks like, the story is that they visited her house over stuff she said on the internet. Although I had a look for her Twitter and it's very, very milquetoast. I don't think that really matters that much. And I think she's like 20. She's very young. And as the story goes, they confiscated an Anglo-Saxon. What they said was an Anglo-Saxon helmet. They asked her why she had it, and they confiscated it. And apparently, her parents also had some sort of like samurai sword in the house or something like that. And they confiscated that as well. She pointed out that the helmet's actually Roman. They haven't given her a receipt for either of them, so she might just never get them back, I suppose, at this point.
I'm sorry to him, but that sounds like she's been scammed. Did she actually get ID of the police?
No idea. No idea at all.
In some scenarios, counter-terrorism police, it appears, don't have to identify themselves, like even when they arrest you or question you or anything. I was listening to a leftist thing the other day. Richard Medhurst, I think his name was, like proper hard left Palestine, wears a kafir and all that.
Yeah.
And he was saying, he was arrested, really unnecessary measures as well. But he said, like the counter-terrorism police would not identify themselves. You're not allowed, and they're just allowed to do that. There's all sorts of different things applied to them. I don't know if is that what visited this young lady?
It seems so. It seems like that way. I think there was a mixture of Merseyside police and counter-terrorism police at her address.
And
so
she's young, right?
Yeah. She's like 20, I think.
Because I got involved a bit in the PA circles like a few years ago, and all the guys who were like late teens, early 20s, a lot of them just doing podcasts, just very peripherally involved. Like not, I don't know if they were like party, I don't think they were party members, but just sort of they know someone who they're podcasting with someone who's in PA. Almost all of them say they had a visit from Prevent, and loads of them just dropped out, even of just doing very, very casual, mild podcasts. They all got. I don't know if Prevent is different from counter-terrorism, but they all it's clearly like an intimidation thing. Someone's been told just stop all these Zoomers getting internationalism sort of thing.
Yeah. I was just looking for. He said about the official Twitter account. Okay, so the actual police have confirmed it was them. But she has got Fair Cop that I think she's working with. And the statement they put out, I'm going to read it out. It says, 19-year-old woman, so she's 19, was visited by anti-terrorist unit and Mersey police yesterday. They asked her about her politics, if she is right-wing, and why she had an Anglo-Saxon, in quotes, replica helmet in the house. They refused to say what she was accused of. They confiscated property, a replica decorative sword hanging on the wall. Okay, so they might not have taken the helmet, I suppose. And they were quoted as saying to her, "Bite your tongue before talking online." Oh yes, yeah. No, I see the tweet actually where Merseyside police actually confirmed it was them.
It's like Adam, it's almost like we live in Stalin's Soviet Union, you know.
Well, no, I'll be honest. I hear a lot of like boomer people saying
it
this.
Really
I take slight umbrage with that because, like, I think the Soviet authorities didn't make themselves look so buffoonish all the time. Like the Soviet authorities were actually very good at scaring people into silence, whereas like our police, like it's literally just the threat of prison that allows them to get away with it. But they actually seem quite pathetic in the public eye.
Well, yeah, because you have like lesbian coppers turn up to tell you, "Are you right wing?" I mean, it's not like the NKVD or anything like that, you know.
Yeah,
you can't really compare the two. So
no, they're not going to take you out and shoot you. Yeah, they're not going to take you out and shoot you in the back of the head, but the intention is the same.
Well, the thing is, it's not though, is it? Because they sit there and to an extent, on some extremes it is, but like a lot of the time, like, I mean, I've said this before as well. I've said sometimes that I'd rather be like beaten up by an American copper who's shouting slurs at me than, you know, have my head kicked in, than be like pathologized by like the finger wagging sort of like matron style, like British copper. You know, they're just kind of embarrassing to have to listen to.
Yeah, and usually their voices are so whiny. It's like
I don't know what you guys think. I don't know what you guys think about this, but I've seen a few people on the right talking about this, and in fact, Steve Laws was one of the guys who posted on Twitter about it. That most of these people who are getting visits from the cops in Britain and who are being charged with various ridiculous offences, they're just pleading guilty, and people have just got to stop talking to the police and get a decent lawyer. You know, get yourself a good solicitor. Don't use the duty guy at the cop shop, you know. This was like the advice that Steve Laws was giving, and I think that's entirely true, because I think if people were to fight some of these cases, they wouldn't necessarily lose.
If the cops come to me,
if it goes to a jury trial.
My first question, if the cops come to me, is just going to be, am I obliged to talk to you? And unless it's a clear yes and they cite chapter and verse, I'm just going to say, well, that's it. That's all I've got to say. Nothing.
Well, yeah, I listened to that fair cop guy on the Lotus Eaters. It wasn't that long ago, maybe a week or two ago. I do think it's worth listening to the 30-minute segment that he does, that they put on YouTube, because he does go through like the sort of questions you should ask them, and the importance of like recording it as well. And he was saying, like, you know, ask them, is it, you know, if they're saying they want you to come down for like a voluntary interview, you need to specifically ask them, you know, what happens if I don't, and see if they will go as far, and make sure you get it in recording as well, go as far as to say that they will arrest you, at which point that's kind of like a clear case of police coercion. So yeah, it's kind of funny that we're almost at this point now where we're like acting like drug dealers with our sort of knowledge on the police and how to handle investigations and how to be cautious around you know public speech and appearances and stuff. It's kind of bizarre.
You know, I've got to say, I mean, I can't understand how the police were able to confiscate an Anglo-Saxon replica helmet. I mean, that's not a weapon even. I mean,
it might not, reading the thing again, it might not have been the helmet that they took. It might have been the sword, which still just seems bizarre. I mean, they you see this a lot. It seemed to calm down in the last couple of years, but there used to be a thing like before lockdowns or at the start of them where the police would always post these hauls of dangerous weapons. and they bang on about knife crime, and it would be like a bicycle tire or a spoon, you know, all these like bizarre implements.
Hate spoon.
Yeah,
a butter knife or a screwdriver, or
yeah.
Oh yeah, screwdrivers. Yeah, so people get stopped and searched for screwdrivers, and they get nicked because they have one in their pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like.
But you can't ban screwdrivers. You can't ban bar knives. You can't ban carving knives. It's just bloody ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like on the whole Anglo-Saxon thing. I mean, I think survivor job is like very like I don't know. Well, I mean, we all know why, but they're like for some reason, as of recently, they're going a lot harder on Anglo-Saxon as a label. Like they're trying to deny Anglo-Saxon even exists. So that's probably what. I don't even. I mean, I saw that woman's because I mean that Josh from Lotus Eaters was retweeting her case, and he was all I saw was she was being quizzed by the police. She didn't really know what to do in that situation. She thought of every moment, so that's why she made a load of mistakes that anyone would do, quite frankly. They took away her 60-year-old father's katana, which seems to be more decorative rather than actual practical use. So that's a bit of a folly. Well, I mean, then again, we're talking the same police force that will. Oh, what was it? That knife drive was it? We did a few years back where you get something like kitchen knives. I can't remember what it was, but it's something ridiculous at the time. Whether arresting people or like doing these turning your knife initiatives, and it was like small pocket knives or I can't remember. But yeah, it's.
I don't know what
it's just
Mitch. I don't know what they'd do if they raided me. Because I've got like things like I don't know what they'd do if they raided me, Mitch. Because I've got things like Gurkha kukris, Zulu assegais. I've got a British Army cavalry saber from the 19th century. But it's just because I'm into military history stuff, you know. It's like it's got nothing to do with being on the right.
Well, whatever you fucking do, don't get raided.
They did this to Buddy Lemmy back in the 70s and 80s, where because he used to collect a lot of German World War II stuff. I mean, he said, "Oh well, this must be because there's a Nazi." And I was like, "Well, no." I mean, then there was Ozzy Osbourne who had the same, but his Jewish wife nagged him so much he had to scrap it all because for reasons I don't fully understand. But yeah. So, I mean, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I mean, I imagine any guy with a decent sense of testosterone in his system just does that stuff. Like collects war memorabilia. Like I've got just a bunch of flags. None of them massively controversial. I mean, the most controversial one will be stuff like like a World War One German army flag. Like with a pushing eagle, that's like the most controversial one. By now, the police will take that. But so yeah, it's just look, I mean, at least with NKVD,
a World War One German army flag, a German World War One army flag. I mean, how on earth could they criticize that?
Well, because it's militaristic, and thus it must be fascistic, blah blah blah. And so that's what they'll use. But also, like I was going to say, it's like the NKVD in Stalin's time, right? Like say where you were Stalin, at least you knew where the parameters were. You knew where you could step in terms of your speech. Whereas under the tyranny we've got, the parameters change year by year. It's a very effeminate form of tyranny where it's just dependent upon whims and vibes, as opposed to clear-cut principles like what you expect in the Soviet Union under Stalin. Because at least as there was Stalin, it's
all
you knew
right.
where you
I'm
stood.
I'm just gonna interrupt you for a second here, Mitch, because I'm reading the chat. All the people complaining about my computer, right? If you go to the top of the chat, there is a pinned comment where you can send paid super chats and you can support the channel. If you want me to get a new computer, that's what that's for. Now, I've had that up for, I don't know, probably a year now. And during that time, I have collected, I think, about $200. And I have to tell you guys, I can't buy a decent computer for $200 in Australia. Okay, I just can't. And I am not a rich man. I am semi-retired, yeah. That's why I take super chats. It's the only reason I take super chat. You guys will notice I put up many comments from the chat that are just comments that are free. So if you guys, if you guys want me to get a new computer, support the channel and I will get a new computer. I simply cannot afford to get one at the present time. I don't have enough money. Simple as that, gents.
Just one thing you could try now.
So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mitch. Please carry on.
I was just going to say, like, I don't know if you're using a VPN. Just sometimes if you're using a VPN, I find disconnecting from the VPN.
No, I'm not.
No. Or just quickly going out and come back in.
Yeah, no, I'm not, mate. I'm not. Trust me.
No.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I will tell you now, right? I've got broadband internet here, but this computer, because it's old, will not use it.
Sometimes if you just disconnect and reconnect, the stream should stay.
Yeah, no, I have tried that many times, mate. Trust me. Yeah, no, I've tried it many times, but it hasn't worked.
Sorry, mate, go on.
But yeah, I'm just talking about people in the chat moaning, you know. But,
yeah, it's like, I don't know. But yeah, it's like you got the whole term Anglo-Saxon, which has been declared war upon by the establishment. I mean, I remember 2019 university where there was a massive debate over getting rid of the Anglo-Saxon course. And I think they actually went through with it because, oh no, the term Anglo-Saxon is racist. You know, I think like one guy was honest with saying, oh well, it lends credence, like it's basically a white supremacist term. It allows like, you know, like identities for white people, blah blah blah. And it's that's why they're going to like that's probably why the police have such an animus with that woman's Anglo-Saxon helmet. Although I heard it was a Roman helmet, which you know, an English woman having a Roman helmet in her home, that's just historical curiosity. Like, it's not really. It's like not really like a cultural identification because I mean we're not because I mean we English aren't really Roman at all. Like, we don't have any Latin blood in our veins. Any Roman helmet found in an Englishman's home would just be historical curiosity. So I go now. It'd be like the same. Let's say if, I don't know that what's his name? That Italian history journal, Megatron. Were to have like a Viking, were to have like a Coppergate Anglo-Saxon helmet in his own house, where I think he lives in like south of Italy or Sicily or something like that. So,
yeah, I mean it definitely seems from the story that it was a Roman helmet, but the police mistook it for an Anglo-Saxon helmet. And to be fair, I don't think they could tell the difference ever. I think they've just because I know that Prevent has this thing where they say that. Like an interest in Anglo-Saxons is a sign of far-right extremism. They also say an interest in Michael Portillo's Great Railway Journeys is also a sign of right-wing extremism. But maybe she didn't have the box set lying around. So
actually, that funny enough, Ataman, that does explain a meme that I have somewhere saved somewhere on my computer, which is like I think it's AI generated, but it's like he's doing like a. Join me on with my Bradshaw guide as we go along the Hyperborean Express, and it's basically like a railway journey through Hyperborean like ice block cities and all that.
Oh, that's good.
Very strange. Mitch, did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up this week?
Aside from the Churchill stuff, there's an intensified attack on the term Anglo-Saxon, which just kind of betrays like the sense of they don't like the label because because of course we arrived here under Hengist and Horsa 1,000 years before the Maoris did in New Zealand. So we're as native to the land as native gets, but they have to declare war on the concept that we are a native people, so they deny that the Anglo-Saxons even existed. Like they play these etymological word games where we go, like they'll say, well, Anglo-Saxon didn't exist as a term. Well, that's kind of bollocks, because I mean, I've got literally got a copy of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle on my bookshelf by Alfred the Great, where King Alfred the Great himself, the sort of, I mean, Henkes and Horus are technically the founders of the English nation, but in terms of England as a kingdom, in its own right, I mean, you could put down Alfred the Great as like the founder of it, because he put the idea out there, and his successors saw it through. But yeah, he called himself the king of the Anglo-Saxons because those are the two main tribes that made up England. Like, for example, we have East Anglia, but I mean, you got Sussex, Wessex, Sussex, Essex, Wessex, and so on. And then you got Mercia and Northumbria, which are founded by the Angles. And then you got to factor in so in Anglo-Saxon times, if you would call yourself king of a people, you wouldn't call yourself a king of a land. Like, so, like,
yeah.
when our monarchy call themselves kings of England or kings of Great Britain, that's a Norman conception of kingship, whereas the Anglo-Saxon conception is you say king of the English or king of the Anglo-Saxons. So, like, our ties to this land go as deep as like the roots of an oak tree. So,
well, I mean, Alfred the Great is literally the father of England. He's literally the father of England. You know, England was his idea, if you know what I mean, and the people who supported him, of course.
Well, I mean, this drive to abolish the term, if I remember correctly, because I remember Survive the Jive, as you mentioned, Mitch, talking about this for a few years now. And there's also a great channel which I recommend, which I think it's called History with Hilbert, who also covers Viking and Anglo-Saxon content on his channel, and it stems from this black university professor. I think I can't remember her name, but she's like in America or Canada, somewhere like that. And this has basically this was sort of driven by one of her papers, and the argument that she gave, and I remember it was absolute like a ridiculous argument, and it was actually lie. It was a straight up lie, because it was like you could easily disprove it by just looking at any royal seal by Alfred or his successors. Was that, well, the term Anglo-Saxon was never used by the contemporaries. It was a term invented by Paul the Deacon, who was from Lombardy or something like that. And it was actually the term Anglo-Saxon was used by Alfred the Great, because it was used in written format. Because, as Mitch said, he referred to himself as king of the Anglo-Saxons.
Chronicles.
Yeah, Anglo-Saxon Chronicles.
Yeah, Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, as Mitch said.
Yeah, and also Bishop Asser, who was a Welshman, also used the term Anglo-Saxon, because that was how you differentiate. That's how the Brittonic Celts would differentiate themselves from the West Germanics of England. So that, I mean, many people view it as a more semantics, or this is just pure semantics. But in reality, what it is a straight up. In some ways you could argue like a cultural, it is a form of genocide, because you're denying the existence of a people aside that make up England and are English, and that you're denying that historical fact. So but yeah, it's Nottingham University, which is funny, because the word Nottingham is Anglo-Saxon, if I remember correctly, Nottingham, or it means also mean home. Mitch, don't know if you can. That's what I recall. Is it? Does Nottingham mean like home, Nottingham, or something in the Anglo-Saxon?
Well, I mean,
Notting is the name of a tribe, and like ham.
Well, Mitch will know.
Home. It's like Birmingham, for example, comes from Beorming, which like means like tribe of tribe who have descent from a god called Beorn, which is basically just a dialectical version of the name Beorn, which is like which is basically our version of the name Björn. And that ham or hum means home. So yeah, Vingol Beorn, as in like the
I have to say, I'm a big fan of Survive the Jive, who is Tom Rouse, who is a good historian. That's why I first started to like him, is because his history is very good. And Tom Rouse, Survive the Jive, was talking about this move to remove the term Anglo-Saxon from the academy 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago. And they want to replace it with early medieval, because, of course, that has no racial connotations whatsoever. And, of course, the whole push of late years has been to try and pretend that the English and the British are not a people, you know? This has been the whole push for many years now.
But this is nonsense, because early medieval is just a loose term to describe the state of Europe in on the eve of the Norman invasions, right? That is the sort of era that you're talking about, and it's just a loose term to discuss the state of Christendom. The Anglo, we talk about the Anglo-Saxon period is specific to when you talk about British history or English history. So how are they going to actually phrase like specific English history though? What are they going to? They just call it like early English history, or what, English and Viking? Is it just be English and Viking history? I mean, how are they going to? Is that what it's just going to be?
Mitch, there's a question in the chat that you would be the best guy to answer. Were there previous attempts to unify the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms into one before Alfred the Great?
Yeah, there were like numerous figures who tried to do it, because in Old English there's the word Bretwalda, which is kind of like our word for emperor, but that was used for one trying to conquer the entirety of Great Britain, not just Angles and Saxons, but also the Welsh and the Scots, etc. So, for example, Sutton Hoo Helmet belonged to a god called King Radwold of East Anglia, who at one time he conquered all of England below the River Humber. So, and he was called Bretwalda for a time, but before Christianity, and of course, like before we started learning about started learning from like Charlemagne how to run a kingdom, the accomplishments of one ruler do not long outlive the death of like a good military leader. So that's often what happened. Like you also had Alfred the Great's grandfather, King Egbert of Wessex, who he ended the Mercian supremacy at the Battle of Essendon, and he dominated all of England from Hadrian's Wall down to Cornwall. But after he died, that all fizzled out. So before Alfred the Great, there were several attempts, but there's like the Anglo-Saxons were too individualistic, too divided. It was only through the Viking invasion smashing the previous order of the Heptarchy, the Seven Kingdoms, before we English rallied around the House of Wessex under Alfred the Great, and in 937 AD at the Battle of Brunanburh, we united into one army at the Battle of Brunanburh, and we faced off against, Britons, Gaels, and Vikings, and won brilliant victory.
Thanks, Mitch. I thought you'd be able to answer that properly, mate. Listen, we've been getting on for an hour, and I'm very happy that this evening we have both Horus and Atman on the stream, because there's been a big controversy over the past week or so about Winston bloody Churchill, as I always refer to him. And this started because Tucker Carlson did an interview with a very sensible American historian who simply gave a realistic view of Winston Churchill. Now, Horus and Atman and I did 4 streams, so probably like, I don't know, probably about 9 hours, I would imagine, altogether, something like that, maybe even 10, talking about British policy from the early 20th century, prior to the First World War, up to about 1942, and Winston Churchill. And it was based like vaguely on the American politician and historian's view. The guy who wrote Winston Churchill and the Unnecessary War, which is a
James
good book,
Buchanan.
by the way, Patrick Buchanan.
Yeah,
Patrick Buchanan, isn't it? Yeah, and it was loosely based on that, but you know, and we looked at everything from Churchill leaving the Conservative Party and joining the Liberals over imperial tariff preference, which was really the last attempt to try and make the old Commonwealth of the British Empire into something real politically, rather than a sentiment thing. And when I say the old Commonwealth, and I have to say this because we have Zoomers watching us and all sorts of people, the old Commonwealth was Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and back then it included South Africa. But so it was the white Commonwealth, really. But anyway, that was the last attempt to really turn the British Empire into something real, and Churchill was against it. What a surprise. You know, if you don't like Churchill like me. And then we looked at Churchill's record in World War One. We looked at Churchill's record between the wars, and we looked at Churchill's record in World War Two. And you know, the facts are out there. It's like, it's not at all controversial if you've actually read anything about it, that Churchill was a disaster for Britain and the Empire, and did more than any other single man to destroy the British Empire. And since I've got Horus and Atman on this stream and missionary history, I thought perhaps that this would be a good stream to talk about this on. And if I might do so, I'd like to ask Horus first of all. Like, and I re-listened to these streams last week because I was reposting them on Twitter, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't reposting anything that was crap. And actually, and these streams are 2 years ago now, I think they stood up pretty well. Horus, what's your view on this stuff?
I'm delighted to see it. As you might imagine, I think Tucker's done us a massive favour having that guy on. I've heard of Martyr Made, or Daryl Cooper. I think Martyr Made is the name of his podcast. I've heard of him before. I've never listened to his stuff. I might do now. I think, there was obviously an instant, very angry reaction from all sorts of people, especially loads of members of the tribe, I noticed. And they were accusing him of basically dog whistling something far stronger than what he said. I actually think that was true. I think that guy has taken red pills, more than what is showing in what he says, and he was very careful about what he said. But he was saying this was a disaster for the West, really. I think he phrased it in terms of America, as Americans are generally inclined to do. Understandably. But he was saying this was a catastrophe, and that's what I would argue about the Second World War. The First World War as well, an absolute disaster. Churchill obviously involved in causing both of them. It's absolutely great that he's opened that can of worms. I would love to have got stuck in on Twitter, because it was one of those days on Twitter where someone just dropped something really fun and something really engaging in your lap. But unfortunately, I was busy writing a piece for Substack. But well done to Tucker, well done to Daryl Cooper, and neither of them have backed down really either. Not much. I noticed one of the interesting reactions I picked up on was, Bari Weiss. She was a New York Times columnist for years, and then she flounced out. Basically, made a big noise about it as a way of launching her own new thing, free press. And she posted 3 articles, she hosts other people on her. Like, she's got one of the biggest Substacks, probably millions of people reading it. I don't know, but she had Victor Davis Hanson, who's sort of like what. He's like the poor man's Patrick Buchanan. Patrick Buchanan basically nailed it with that book, The Unnecessary War. Like, I think I saw a critique of that book from Ron Unz a while ago, and Ron Unz was quite disparaging about it, and I was surprised because Ron Unz is quite a revisionist himself in a lot of ways. But Patrick Buchanan, like, maybe not everything he says is right, I mean, he mainly just stitches together excerpts from other books. That's mostly what he's doing, right? I think very, very well. That book was a revelation to me. Victor Davis Hanson was one of them, and it was just the most cliched sort of totally obvious, predictable centre-right defence of, Roosevelt and Churchill and just all the most obvious nostrums of the war, right? Of the war myth, basically. And then a couple of other writers, I can't even remember their names, but it was. I went to read them, and each of them was paywalled. And it's like, so you're freaking out as though this, the idea of Churchill as a hero being undermined is a devastating blow. Is anti-Semitic even, and all this stuff. But people can only read it if they pay to read your blog. I just thought that was symbolic. It's like, are you serious or not? Like, are you worried or not? Are you frightened or not? Like, prove it. If you are, at least give away these rebuttals, which are not very good anyway, for free, right? I will, maybe I'm promoting myself a little bit here, but on my Substack, I'm writing the opposite from them. I've written 3 or 4 essays this year about the few years preceding the Second World War. And they took me a hell of a lot of work. I source everything very, very carefully. I mean, not just, giving a source, but making sure it's a source that will stand up. Because ultimately, I might get arrested for what I'm saying. Who knows where we're going 5 years from now? And I want to be able to at least defend it on a factual basis. And if they send me down anyway, fine. At least I was correct. Maybe it's a bit naive, but I'm very, very careful to make it hard to dispute, hard to accuse me of any sort of libel or anything. I don't know how they would, and just very careful to make it as rock solid as I can. And like, these guys are writing this sloppy, presumptive stuff that just doesn't really cite anything. Just basically their utterances that they probably tossed off in an hour or two. That my articles take weeks to write, plus all the reading, and it was like, even then you're paywalling it. And I just thought, well, like, what is the war myth like a business? I just couldn't believe it. But yeah, like, it was a ferocious debate all over
Horus,
Twitter.
I totally agree with you, but can I just say one thing? Horus, I totally agree with you, mate. But can I just say one thing? And I'll ask you and Atterman, who did those streams with me. Like, when we did those streams, we were not being pro Moustache Man. We were not.
Right.
There was very little on those streams that was pro AH. We were simply critiquing Churchill from a British point of view.
Yeah, I think we sit in the space where British people should sit. We're not making a case for fascism or National Socialism or Hitler or Germany. We're not saying they did nothing wrong. We're not saying they didn't commit any crimes. Nothing like that. We're just saying the war was bad. Yeah, primarily, in the first place, our concern is with Britain, what it meant for Britain, including our grandfathers, right? Or our fathers or grandfathers and uncles. Like, both. One of my, anyway, I won't go into it, like what happened to mine, but yeah, they suffered, and yeah, it's what it means for us now as well. Because that's why, I decided quite a clear idea in my mind that this idea of Churchill as a hero, especially, and of the necessity of the war, and of him being this prescient, seer who 5 years before the war saw what was going to happen. I decided, I deduced, in my opinion, that is a poisonous idea now. It makes people believe crazy things in 2024, and the more it's undermined, the more freely we can think. And of course, the more free we'll be from anti-fascism, which is a kind of tyranny, which is a way of turning our people against ourselves and against each other and saying that we've got to live in a kind of disgrace. Because amazingly, at the end of the war, the whatever crimes Germany did commit and whatever wrongs they did, and of course they did have a big role in causing the war. They were very aggressive to certain other countries, right? That has somehow been used against the whole of the West, including white Americans, including British people, including, you know, like even just white people anywhere who adopt right-wing politics. We're all called Nazis, and what does that mean? It means you want to start wars. It means you want to murder civilians, right? We're all accused. The whole white race basically is accused of that. Somehow, it doesn't make logical sense, but it has somehow that has been imposed upon the whole of the West, right? And that's why it's very important to undermine it. I know that our old friend Brutus takes a different view, and you know, I always thought his view was kind of worth engaging with, but I do think he's wrong. You don't just stick with whoever was the leader of your country. No, if the leaders were bad, you absolutely very, very much distinguish yourself from them and say, no, like the people didn't want this. This was not good for the people. Churchill done all right out of it, made him, you know, got himself a lot of statues, but that's a different matter. Britain as a country is wrecked and continues to be poisoned by it. That's how I see it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know if Brutus's position has changed at all, but
he doesn't seem to have. He doesn't, and you and I were both friends with him at one stage, but his position still seems to be pretty similar.
Mm.
It's called Alfred the Invincible now, if anybody wants to go get his perspective on it. He did a stream the other day, which I was listening to before this.
Yeah, right. The thing is that, I mean, I was kind of in his camp partly just because I thought that it was just an impossible task to deconstruct the World War II myth. And now it's just being deconstructed in one fucking podcast and everyone's losing their mind over it, which is kind of funny to see, but also just quite amazing. I mean, obviously it's not been totally deconstructed, but it is going to be nice to see. I mean, I just went and rewatched it again because I only half listened to it the first time, like this afternoon. And I noticed that obviously Tucker Carlson's got his own website and he uploads it to lots of other platforms. But on YouTube alone, it's got close to 1 million views. It's only been up for 5 days. But there are all these shorts now of particular parts. There's one particular short going around that's got quite a lot of views. I think I saw it reposted on TikTok with millions of views. And it was the part when he said that when we win, there should be a Nuremberg for the people that did this to England, which is, you know, based. But I don't know where it sort of goes from here, because I kind of feel like after these sorts of things happen, there's always a little bit of a retraction, and people kind of don't keep pushing the envelope as hard as they probably should for a little while. So I suppose we'll have to see what happens going forward. Obviously, I imagine Tucker Carlson's got some big thing coming up, and he's going to have obviously be fully booked for guests on all sorts of different subjects. So it's not as if he's going to keep hitting the nail on the head with this stuff. I suppose it kind of needs to be down to actually people on the right, and a lot of the people on the right, sadly, seem to have more of a problem making allies with a guy that said Churchill wasn't all that great than they do with their literal enemies, their literal political opponents. So I'm not sure.
Can I just say one thing? I'm sorry, I'm sure I've got some delay and I'm interrupting you, but couldn't kill those 2 years ago now, all right? And we were pretty much saying exactly the same thing as this American historian was saying on Tucker Carlson's stream, which was why I re-listened to them, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't like promoting something that wasn't accurate. But I actually think we were saying exactly the truth, basically. And I think we were. we were saying exactly what this guy was saying, but 2 years ago, when before it was fashionable, because we're not Tucker Carlson, of course. But as I just said to Horus, we were critiquing it from a British point of view. We weren't critiquing it from a German point of view. We were critiquing it for why was this bad for Britain? Because it was, it's like, because it just was. And the biggest short take I thought was great was, why is London no longer an English and British city? If winning World War II, winning in air quotes, was such a bloody good thing,
Oh yeah, like if I'm at work or I'm at like a family function, because I'm subversive, right? if a particular like harsh topic comes up about history and everyone likes to cross their arms and pretend like they're the adults in the room and talk about serious stuff for 5 minutes, and when it's over, I'll just kind of like look out whimsically and be like, well, if this is what victory looks like, I wouldn't want to see defeat, and just sort of let that hang. And after a few moments, people kind of realize where you've gone with that, and they don't always appreciate it, but I still say it every time. But it's kind of when we did those streams, if you remember, as I pointed out at the time, as we all did, Patrick Buchanan wasn't particularly pro Uncle A. He had some quite cutting criticisms. Actually, Patrick Buchanan seems to come out of those books kind of liking Chamberlain a lot and not liking how aggressive Hitler was towards him and disrespectful he was. He kind of like that was some of the vibes I got anyway. But also like there are still things that I have like Oswald Mosley, for example, famously used to say that Hitler would have got what he wanted if he'd actually just been a bit more patient and slowed down a bit. And I still sometimes think about things like the invasion of Norway, and I understand it from like a German tactical standpoint, but I also kind of then look at it and think like, that is very provocative,
Yeah, it's. You get some people on our side who think like, oh well, it's like Hitler's put down as like forces of his pan-Germanic, and I know he's only pan-German. It's like, well, you look at a lot of the sins the Germans had, like invading Denmark and Norway, who bore no aggression towards Germany, as well as the Netherlands for a matter, even though like us Anglos and the Germans, they're also Germanic countries, and that didn't stop Hitler from invading them unjustly. And also, in the case of the Netherlands, they had to go through the Hunger Winter of 1944 to 1945 because of Dutch partisan war efforts, basically. And you've also got because you have I think like it was Rotterdam as well as Warsaw, which got because often like every 14th of February, you get people complaining about Dresden, which, that was like, that can be controversial, but then it's also, well, the Germans also did their own sins. And also, like, Hitler, the main mistake he made was annexing Czechoslovakia, because after that point, Chamberlain had no leg to stand on. Like, no, Churchill had him lock, stock, and barrel over him, because he could just go, oh, well, look at this. Hitler annexed Czechoslovakia, even though promised not to. So, will you now concede I've got the right on this? And what could Chamberlain say after that?
Yeah,
like he didn't have a leg to stand on.
Yeah, and that's another thing as well that Buchanan points out in that book, is that actually Chamberlain kind of saved Germany a lot of trouble with the whole Czechoslovakia thing, because the Sudetenland was a bit of a I think Buchanan likens it to like a rotten floorboard that they were about to step on, and
ridiculously hurt. Yeah, it was very well fortified amidst mountain passes and whatnot, so it would have been hard, even with Stukas and whatnot, for the Germans to invade. And I think there were conspiracies in the military led by the likes of I forget the guy's name, von Witzleben and Ludwig Beck, who were saying they would depose Hitler if war were to. Yeah, Beck and Witzleben, who were conspiring to get rid of Hitler, because there was a German war plan with a Fall Grün or Case Green, but it was never carried out because a lot of the German military talking were just like, well, we can't invade Czechoslovakia because it's so well fortified and made prepared for war. Because I got reading when Czechoslovakia declared independence in late 1918. There were Czechs who were brutalizing some of the innocent, some like German women for like singing German songs and whatnot. So there was a lot of anti-German sentiment in Czechoslovakia at the time, and they always knew that the Germans would come back with a vengeance. So that's why, come 1938 with Edvard Beneš and his lot, Czechoslovakia was ready to go to war. I remember reading that Beneš, he actually enacted a partial mobilization to antagonize Hitler, and he thought that the French would have his back, and they did for a time, and he humiliated Hitler for a time, but that soured him in regard to how Chamberlain viewed him, because Chamberlain just looked at Beneš and thought, yeah, there's no working with this guy, he's relentlessly anti-German.
Can I throw something in there? About that partial mobilisation, that was in May 1938, wasn't it? Apparently, there's a book by Igor Lukes, who's by no means, I think he's Czech. He's by no means at all sympathetic to Hitler. It's very, very clear throughout his book. But he says that mobilisation appears to have been provoked. Well, he says the most likely culprit, anyway, was Maxim Litvinov, who was the most senior foreign policy guy in the Soviet Union. And he shows the evidence is persuasive enough for me. But that was provoked by the Soviets. The Soviets fed the Czechs false intelligence very, very deftly, it seems, and that provoked the Czechs to do that, which then provoked Hitler to various, angry measures, because Hitler seems to have been very easily triggered by such things.
Yeah, I've heard that Abwehr, like the German intelligence, they actually had photos of Tukhachevsky meeting up with I forget the guy's name. Like some of the veterans of the Czechoslovak Legion who fought their way through Russia during the Civil War there, and they were, of course, in the military high command, so there were deep ties being sown between Czechoslovak military high command and the Stavka in Moscow. So,
and then Tukhachevsky was executed, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was killed off in Great Purge by Stalin because rivalries over, because they both blamed each other for losing at Warsaw. So.
Oh, what, in 1920?
Could I just say?
Yeah.
Could I just say, Jans, like my tiny area of expertise is kind of like naval and military history, and these days it's very common to poo-poo things like the Maginot Line in France. Okay, and this is kind of. It's very close to the kind of defenses that the Czechs had. And the thing is, the Germans never attacked the Maginot Line because it would have been almost impossible to break through. That's why they didn't attack the Maginot Line. Instead, they went through the Ardennes. And even when the Americans and the Brits were attacking Germany, the Maginot Line was very difficult, and the Germans were defending it, even though it was facing the wrong way around. It was very, very difficult to conquer it. So I think it is true that in 1938, the German Wehrmacht would have found it very difficult to have captured that area, particularly because it's in fairly mountainous terrain and, no good for tanks and all this kind of stuff, which is what the Germans were into. And I think that's often forgotten. But from the British point of view, if you'd have gone to war in 1938, Britain would have had an air force mostly full of biplanes. I think we had like one squadron of Spitfires and maybe 6 squadrons of Hurricanes, and everything else was still biplanes. It was stupid for Britain to go to war in 1930. Yeah, I mean, it was stupid for Britain to go to war in 1939, but slightly less stupid from a defensive point.
I think with this Sudetenland.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you guys. I just wanted to put a little bit of
Sorry, there might be a bit of a delay here. Sorry. With the Sudetenland crisis, I remember my sort of understanding of the causes of the war. I can't remember what they were before, but in about 2018, I remember reading that. Wait a minute, Britain wasn't allied with Czechoslovakia, and it was only allied with Poland from sort of 6 months before declaring war on Germany. And when I looked into both those two questions, why was Chamberlain why was he involved with the Sudetenland crisis? He wasn't allied, so France was. But why was Chamberlain there negotiating instead of France, right? Why wasn't France negotiating the story? And likewise, why was it that Britain offered the guarantee to Poland the next year? When you look into those questions, the whole thing, it's really difficult. It makes the whole thing 10 times more complicated. But it does open up the history of that. It's kind of two gateway subjects for understanding the causes of the war. It's like, it's not what is portrayed. Like this idea of Chamberlain sort of like, just timidly retreating. Just, no, we don't want to fight. We'll do anything rather than fight. It was utter nonsense. Like Chamberlain was ready for a fight. He just thought there was a good time to do it, and he thought there was a good way of doing it. Nothing like the way Churchill did it, obviously. He was into limited war, mainly using the navy, obviously, using blockades, and trying to isolate Hitler and so on, and not just concerned with Hitler. He didn't consider, Germany the only threat. So he was very, very sensible, rational, and measured. And he's one of the most unfairly maligned people in British history. Absolutely outrageous the way he's talked about. Chamberlain was sensible. He was a patriot. He was intelligent.
100%, mate. 100%. Chamberlain knew that Britain could not win a short war and could not afford a long war. Chamberlain, these were just facts. Britain couldn't win a short war against Germany, and we couldn't afford a long war because it would bankrupt us, which is exactly what Winston Churchill did, of course. But,
Yeah, it's
and
like...
that's part of how we're in the place we're in now.
Yeah, I was going to say on the topic of Czechoslovakia, I think it was the French were very involved with Czechoslovakia, going back to the days of the Czechoslovak Legion in Siberia. Yeah, but then the thing was, in the interwar period, France kind of pretty much had no bollocks with them because after World War One, they were scared of war without us helping them. So that's why Chamberlain kind of had sort of premier voice in the West in regards to dealing with Hitler in Munich, because the French largely deferred to us. Like if we didn't stand against,
they did.
It's like when
they did.
Yeah, it's like when the Germans remilitarized the Rhineland. We didn't stand against that because we just thought, well, this is just the Germans correcting something that we found wrong. Anyway, it was a French condition, not a British condition. And the French, they weren't going to enforce the Treaty of Versailles if we weren't with them. So same goes with Czechoslovakia. It was only in Poland that the French started being a lot more.
Can I just slightly interrupt Asia? Could I just slightly interrupt our conversation just to point out Mr. Gently Benevolent's comment in the chat? At least we aren't speaking German lands. But when you look at that, and I'm sure that's what Mr. Gently Benevolent means, is like everything Hitler ever wrote, everything the Moustache Man ever wrote was he was going east. Okay? There was no, as far as I've ever seen anyway, Hitler had no great desire to fight Britain or France. He never did. As far as I can see, there was nothing I ever saw. But he wanted to go east, okay? And his initial, hang on, mate, his initial idea was to get an alliance with Poland.
Yeah, his concern was with
initially what he wanted to do, and of course the Polish. Yeah, his initial idea was to get an alliance with Poland, and Poland was not a democratic country or anything like that. Poland was pretty much a military dictatorship, right? And I have never understood why Britain gave a shit whether Hitler invaded Poland or not, you know? I mean, I get if you're a Pole, it's probably important, but I'm not a Pole. I'm an Englishman. And I don't care if Hitler invades Poland.
Yeah, but
just like I don't care if Russia invades Ukraine, you know? I don't care.
Yeah, the thing about Poland as well, that's stupid as well, is when you look up a geographical map of Poland, the country's flat as a pancake, akin to the Netherlands. So us guaranteeing them just put a target on
there's
map,
not much to defend.
Yeah, so aside from the cities like Warsaw and so on, the Poles were buggered anyway because I mean they didn't really have much in the way of an armored mechanical force. Most of the forces were literally just infantry working on like weapons they had from like 20 years ago when they were fighting off the Bolsheviks. They didn't really modernize since then, even though the army has something like 30% of the budget going their way under Josef Pilsudski, because it wasn't just the Germans had to war with, but it was also the Soviets, because they're now led by Stalin, who had a real axe to grind against Poland, that reared its ugly head in 1944 with the Warsaw Uprising, including when he was shooting down some of our supply planes, like South Africa, New Zealand, etc., trying to supply the Warsaw Uprising. So, it's war. They say war makes for strange bedfellows, but I mean, there's no reason why Churchill should have allied with Stalin in World War II, when in fact Stalin had British blood on his hands.
So what I'm trying to say is that when Mr. Gently Benevolent says, at least we ain't speaking German, how would the Brits have been speaking German if Britain and France had, say, stayed neutral in 1939 and Hitler invades Poland, beats Poland, and then goes off and invades Russia, which is always what he was going to do, and it's always what he said he was going to do? Why on earth did we care about that? I mean, me personally, I would have been very happy for the last SS Panzer Grenadier to kill the last NDV guy somewhere near Archangel. I wouldn't have cared. Neither of them were our friends.
Yeah, it's like in the case of like a whole.
That's always been one of my major points about World War II.
It's like oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I think that is like one of the main points that many points that people sort of think to, is that ultimately, if you look at the history of Germany from the interwar period, you had communist Bolshevik-backed uprisings in Germany, along Germany's border, like with Hungary and so on. And so in the German mind, this was a constant war with Bolshevism, and the expansion east was seen by the Germans as, I mean, you could even say like a holy war of some types, trying to defeat the Red Terror and Bolshevism, which murdered millions of Christians. And that's why, in the Baltic and in modern day Ukraine and Belarus, why Germans were met by the local population as heroes and welcomed them as heroes. So, I mean, there was like this component which why it was eastward, that was important. And yeah, I mean, the ultimate war. If you look at the war goals of keeping Poland free, well, within 7 years, it was under the control of the Soviet Union. It was a puppet state of the Soviet Union until '89. So, yeah, I mean that is the crux of it. And we've been doing the stream, that Richard Hilton's book, The Imperial Obituary, The Mysterious Death of the British Empire, and in that we look at the British Empire and everything, but if you look at because the Second World War is tied with the death of the British Empire and the French and other European powers. What we did was we sacrificed the British Empire for this conflict, which had no benefit at all. And our supposed allies would later tag team us and screw us over in the Persian Gulf and in Suez and in many cases to basically carve up our empire and our
100% true, AI. 100% true, yeah.
It's like,
oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say the whole thing about German dominating the world, and the thing is, I mean, I'm not going to hate the whole like the whole, because the boomers, and I'm only thinking back, if we lost the war, it'd all basically be like a Wolfenstein game where you'd have the KKK speaking German under Nazi jackboots marching all over the south of America, blah blah blah. That's essentially like the boomer truth regime in regards to World War II. I think the Nazis wanted to take over everything from Alaska to New Zealand, and so on, which is crap. But also, yeah, and the main thing I hate about it is so it just creates this really cringy it just creates this cringy boomer patriotism where we just have to hate the Germans. And Carl Benjamin sometimes is sog on the cat where he'll just dunk on the Germans. So, well, it's just at a time like this where we're all suffering from the same problems, I'd go back to sort of Germanic brotherhood, blah blah blah. I don't know where it's going with that, but yeah.
It's funny you mentioned.
Well, I mean, Mitch, we even spoke on these streams that I did with Horus and Alma. We spoke about this. Britain was sending its most modern fighter aircraft, including Spitfires as well as Hurricanes, to Stalin. We were sending him almost all our spare tanks. At a time when Malaya and Singapore, which every sensible person knew that Japan was going to attack sooner rather than later, didn't have a single modern British aircraft or a single tank. Not one. There were no tanks in the whole of Malaya and Singapore in 1941. And we were sending them to Stalin and the Soviets.
The thing of those shipping loads of stuff through the Northern Passage.
I'm pretty ruthless, me. I would have let the Soviets face the Germans without those British tanks and without those British fire aircraft. But I'm pretty fucking ruthless, because if I'd have been in charge, like Churchill was, my number one thing would have been the British, not the bloody Soviets. But sorry, Horus, carry on, mate.
The thing of what you just said, and just adding to that, the British naval men being sent over through the Northern Passage, those frozen seas, to ship stuff over to the Soviets, obviously being fired at by German ships and German torpedoes and whatever. That's particularly galling. That, to think that British men were sent to die to supply the Soviets that's really rotten. That. That's just wrong. It's also just to pick up on the question of the empire. You mentioned something about how the empire fared as a result. Obviously it was destroyed, obviously, as we all know, but as a result of the war. I wanted to just raise the question of, I don't know, have you ever looked at who in particular, which individuals in positions of power were the most citing the empire, the defense of the empire, as a reason for the anti-German foreign policy that they wanted? Because obviously Winston Churchill was one of the who sometimes would cite the empire as the reason, we need to defeat Germany to defend the empire. But Leo Amery seems to be another one of those, right? And also, I came across a guy I'd never even heard of, but I came across him as Lord Lloyd. I don't know if anyone knows him, George Lloyd, Lord Lloyd. He was another one who was scheming in all sorts of ways to just frustrate Germany in every sort of way he could, which maybe is understandable, but it's just helping the Soviets by doing so. And again, his whole idea was just we have primacy in the world. Let's keep it. Germany is the biggest threat to that in his view. Let's just destroy Germany, basically, not destroy them, but hobble them. And look, where's your empire now, George?
But
well done,
Horus. But Horus, the Germans were able to do in World War II, particularly. I mean, in World War One, the Germans couldn't really do anything to the British Empire, but and in fact, Britain gobbled up all their colonies. But in World War II, when the German Navy was even vastly smaller than it had been in World War One, when it was still a lot smaller than the Royal Navy, the Germans had no chance of doing anything to the British Empire. None.
Yeah, I don't know what these guys thinking was.
Literally had no chance.
I mean, some of these guys, it's just maybe just unintelligence. I'm not really sure, like how they could think that a war that we could not afford. This is in the Great Depression, and already the country was in debt and so on. But obviously, the way that Chamberlain wanted to fight the war was sensible and measured, and always was thinking about the financial question. And then the way Churchill thought it was like absolutely discard and scorn the financial question. And it is, in my opinion, the finances, the debt that was accumulated, and obviously the
he couldn't even control
to America.
His own finances, never known the countries.
Well, yeah, and David Lloyd George, I think, was the same. Like, these are guys who are always relying on favours and bribes and stuff, and yeah, like I think that it was the debt, and particularly being in debt to America, which had very openly proclaimed, you have to give up your colonies, you have to liberate them.
Horus, I've got to say,
that's what dissolved the empire, I think.
Horus, I've got to say this, that Churchill in the 1930s was the head of the focus group, okay? And the focus group had a particular group of people in mind. Like, it was run by a particular group of people. It had a particular group of people in mind. And let's say these days they have a nation somewhere in the Middle East, okay? But that's just a fact. You can't dispute that. It's true.
You mean Jordanian people, right? Yeah.
Yeah, something like they're quite close to Jordan. They're quite close enough.
If anyone wants to read the article that I've written on Substack, it's called Champions of Judea. And there's a passage in that where, and this is as well sourced as any other historical claim, as far as I can tell. Robert Whaley Cohen brought the money, and he it wasn't just his own money. He brought £50,000 to start with, which is, I don't know, millions now, maybe tens of millions. I'm not sure, but
now it would be,
yeah. It was £50,000 from a secret fund of we don't know how much that was assembled at New Court, which was the Rothschilds banking premises, plus also a residence, I think. And it's just, all we know is leaders of Anglo, the tribe, right? So that's all that's specified. And this is from a book written by Robert Henriques, who was himself one of the leaders of the tribe. So he's saying it proudly. And nobody's ever challenged this. All they've done is just demonize you if you talk about it. But that is absolutely proven, and nobody disputes it, as far as I can tell. They just call you a Nazi.
Well, it's quite interesting because
I'll give you another example. Hang on a sec. I'll give you another example, Horus. Who did not care about the Singapore military base? Okay, and the Singapore military base was basically designed to defend the British position in the Far East and in the Pacific. And in particular, it was designed to defend Australia and New Zealand. Okay. What group of people can you think of who really didn't give two shits about that?
Yeah, my grandfather was captured at Singapore.
Because I can think of a group of people. Yeah, I know he was, mate. You've told you
particularly nasty thing. Yeah,
you said that on the streams that we did, and many others were too. Yeah, it was the biggest British military defeat in history, and it was really the result of Winston Churchill sending every single spare British modern fighter and every single spare British tank to the Soviet Union and bloody Joseph Stalin. Now, what group can you think of in the world who didn't care about defending Australia and New Zealand or the British position in the Far East, but deeply cared about what happened in Europe? What group can you possibly think of? I mean, you know,
the obvious one, plus obviously white.
Who might perhaps. Yeah, and they might perhaps have been related to the focus group and what have you. And Winston Churchill, of course, was always convinced the Japanese would never attack. Because Winston Churchill made every bad military and naval decision that was ever possible, of course. But, you know.
I happen to be reading a biography of Winston Churchill at the moment by Roy Jenkins, and like again and again he lauds him. You know, it's very laudatory biography throughout. But even he can't hide just all the many, like, it's just endless wrongs of Churchill. Like, just like, even if you dress it up with praise, it just rings through. Like, this guy just was just reckless about the future of the country, mainly, well, partly for his own aggrandizement, partly because he was basically hired, and all sorts of things. I won't drone on about it, but it's just like even his fans admit just the terrible conduct of the war and a terrible
he was a total warmonger. He was a total warmonger. Horus, Winston Churchill was a total warmonger his whole life, but he was totally useless at directing it. Like he was completely crap at naval and military strategy. Like there's seldom been a guy who was worse.
Yeah, dreadful. I think we've also mentioned before, like, personally, he was actually quite brave, like physically, and you know, and that probably didn't do any good.
There are two things. Yeah, there are two things I'll say about Winston Churchill. He was personally brave, yes, he was, and he wrote good English. But apart from that, I have nothing good to say about the man.
I think his bravery was like over the top. So he often sacrificed. Like, I mean, it's not that he had no emotions about it, but he often sacrificed large amounts of men because he thought that's what I would do. I would charge the enemy, sort of thing. And there was some truth to that. But he also made him talented as well.
He wrote a book called The Malacan Field Force, okay, in which he as a very new second lieutenant, really slagged off Sir Bindon Blood, who was the British commander there, who won his campaign quite easily, by the way. But Churchill didn't, you know, Churchill always wanted to be cleverer than everyone else. And the other British officers took the piss out of him in the Malacan Field Force because he rode a grey horse. And like everyone knew, one of the main dangers when you were fighting the Pathans on the northwest frontier of India was their snipers. And of course, riding a grey horse was like making yourself a target, you know. And Churchill did that on purpose just because he wanted people to notice him, you
know. I've said enough, so I'll let other guys speak. I'll have to drop off soon. I'm going to need to have a bite to eat. But yeah, been good talking.
Yeah, I need to drop off soon too. I don't really know much else what there is to add. I mean, because I think Time Stealer pointed out about the Matilda tanks as well, and that was quite mind-numbing.
Yeah,
because like when the war kicked up over there, like the RAF, for example, they were just fighting their entire campaign was just a retreat campaign. They were just covering purely British forces on the ground and purely in a defensive position. It was pretty bleak.
If you don't mind, guys,
your Matilda tanks.
Sorry, I was just going to say I will drop
Horus,
out. I'll still be listening, but I'm gonna drop off as a guest now. So yeah, thanks for having us on, and yeah, carry on. It's interesting.
Many thanks for joining us, Horus. You're always welcome, mate.
Cheers, mate. Yeah, good to talk to you all, lads. Right. Take care.
Just to reply to Adam, the Matilda tank thing. Yeah, go on, Horus. The Matilda tank thing, Adam, is quite important because the Matilda tank was a very heavily armored tank. In fact, like in North Africa, the only guns that could penetrate it were the German 88mm guns, which were extremely large and powerful. The Japanese didn't have anything like that at all. And if we had sent some of those Matilda tanks to Malaya in 1940 and early 1941, Japanese would have had a very hard time because Japanese tanks were basically crap, you know. But what happened in Malaya and Singapore was that the British forces had no tanks at all. Because of Churchill, because he was sending these tanks to the Soviets and Stalin. But, you know, a regiment of Matilda tanks in Malaya would have given the Japanese a very, very hard time. Like the Australians were still using Matilda tanks in 1945 because the Japanese still didn't have anti-tank guns that could penetrate them. So, I mean, you know, it's a true story.
Well, and Duke, from my understanding of the Japanese, the anti-tank guns were the men themselves.
Well, they had a 37mm anti-tank gun, but it couldn't penetrate a Sherman, and Shermans were not as heavily armored as Matildas were.
What I was referring to is you had like I don't know what they had, but it was like they were carrying. You'd have men who would charge into tanks with those poles and explosives. Well, I remember it from like the
the Japanese did have like they did have like kamikaze guys trying to kill tanks, for sure.
Yeah.
Not a good way to kill tanks, to be honest.
No, I mean the problem with the decline, like I said, just the thing about many people, and I think Horus and Ataman and Mitch, we've all sort of raised the from that interview the many problems of Churchill and the legacy of the war, and the problem that I mean, for me, what I sort of come back to is, I don't really think about, okay, well, was this good for Germany or Poland? Or my sort of point was, look at where Britain is today. Look what happened in the world. Look at and you look at what Richard Hilton was talking about in our streams, where you had this orderly, structured society, where within the empire, peoples and cultures could just exist and were largely content, because that's what the thing is. They had that report by two lords. I think it was Chelmsford, and I forget the name of the other one, who were largely liberal and lefty, and did this report to find out sort of the opinion of the Indian population, the Indian subcontinent, and 95% were content with British rule even up until the interwar period, which goes against popular conceptions of the legacy of the Hindu nationalist movement. I mean, Hindu nationalism really only took off after independence because it was the dominant power. People shift towards dominant powers, right? And so, but the what you had was you had the very deliberate attempt by New York socialists and other groups in the United States with the help of a treacherous class of people in this country to betray and to abolish the British Empire and as a result you had this I guess you could say what caused the creation of the third world as a thing, because and this is what you had with this thing with regret in the 60s and 70s, where America didn't have that level of influence and control in places like Africa and Asia, and you had this regret of actually, by some elites in America, of actually forcing the British withdrawal and the end of the empire and decolonization and under the new UN Charter and what have you, because of course the power vacuum, communists would try and get in there and vice versa, and as a result of that, you then had this sort of then allowed and encouraged massive immigration.
Never underestimate this, though. Never underestimate that when Britain decolonized countries in Africa, American companies were able to go straight in there and take over. Never underestimate that, because that is a great deal of truth too.
Yeah, and the one thing that's quite interesting, I remember it was on a podcast, and I think I think it was when the Queen died, and there was a discussion about the British Empire then. I want to say it was like Bronze Age pervert or Rorig nationalist or someone like that. One of the things that was quite interesting is there was this debate that sort of sprung up online about the small hat influence on the British Empire, and I think it was a time when Semi-Agog, it was like, was the British Empire the original gay empire and everything. It was around that sort of time you had all those back and forth discussions, and when I looked into the African Company or the East India Company or various other merchant ventures within the British Empire that help expand the British rule and dominance and influence in parts of like Asia and Africa and North America and what have you. One thing I found, and this was pretty much universal up until to this end, was that you didn't actually have that sort of small hat influence, if you could, let's say, that one would expect. I mean, like in India, you did have like the Sosin family, who were a group of Iraqi, small hat types, but it's not like they sat on the board.
It was
or had
always much weaker.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It was always much weaker.
I mean, in reality,
in the very story,
in the reality, Iron Duke, if you actually look at if you wanted to look at a minority group that had a large influence, was actually the Scots, particularly in the Lowland Scots. There was a sort of influence.
Yeah.
In India and Africa and even back in the sort of earlier part of the empire in North America. I mean in North America you actually had like an elite group of Devonshire men who were sort of influential in modern day Canada and then the Hudson Bay area. So there was that's where it's kind of interesting, and maybe why there was a bit of resentment in that sort of sense with the British Empire. I mean, who knows? But it sort of reminds the fact that even that the foundation of the empire wasn't. I mean, it was. I guess from many people at the time, when you look at like what was going on in the world at that point, between the Bolsheviks and and everything else, the movements, various like people kicked out of the Soviet Union by Stalin who went to America, that the British Empire was, I guess, an easy target to go at because it never had those sorts of, it never had to deal with those sorts of problems. That sort of corrupted it, and that's what, and I think that's what Richard Hilton he was getting at in our last chapter, because it was it was interesting to see that you know, and he was pointing out the linguistic sort of way that they sort of deceived masses of British people by using terms like we're not giving up the empire, we're growing up, all that sort of stuff, and of course, as Horus and others said earlier, correct. I mean, Churchill would regularly say I'm not going to be the last prime minister that presides over the empire. I mean, his whole persona to the British public on the face was, we're not giving up the British Empire. This is about preserving the British Empire. So
it was the absolute opposite. It was the opposite of what he did.
Yeah,
his persona was the opposite of what he did. And yeah, look, I like Semyagogue. I think Semyagogue's a very intelligent bloke, and he thinks for himself, which is a good thing. But I think his whole interpretation that the British Empire was the original gay is just not true. I'm sorry, it's not. I mean, America was only really taken over. Yes, it had heavy influence, even in the late 1930s and the 1940s, but it was really only taken over by a certain group in the Middle East in the 60s, really, increasingly. So that today you got a situation where the Israeli prime minister can turn around and say to the American president, get stuffed, I'm just not going to take any notice of you, which is exactly what happened about a week ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, there again, the president's Biden, who doesn't know what day it is. So
I mean, that was like, looking back at the Ocean Apart series, the Adam Curtis series, which I think probably one of his better ones. When you watch it with Richard Hilton's, with Richard Hilton's book of the Imperial Obituary, you see the paint a picture of how, I mean, like with the Suez Crisis, for example, that's what NASA said to us, basically get stuffed, and in response, it was okay. We're sending in the gunboats and the military, and we're just going to. I mean, this is just because. I mean, think about it. When you say no to the British Empire, what happens? You're going to get.
And if it had just been that, and if it had just, but if it had just been that, NASA would have lost pretty quickly, as indeed he was losing. But strange to say, the president of America didn't like it.
Yeah, because America's a true enemy.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and this is.
Oh look, I don't totally. I don't. Hang on, guys. I don't believe America is the true enemy in the sense of the people, but the government. Yeah, maybe.
Well, I mean, the past 100 years they've been screwing us over. At some point, you got to call a spade and realise, look.
But it's the government, not the people. But yeah, I like it. I mean, I'm no fan of the British government at the moment. I don't think you guys are either.
No.
So, yeah.
I mean, not be funny, though, going back to that debate, that Tucker, Carlson thing. If you're American, I could understand why you would consider Churchill a hero, because, I mean, he did pave the way for American hegemony.
Oh, if I was an American, I absolutely would. Yeah, if I was an American, I think Churchill was the best thing since sliced bread. But I'm not. I'm an Englishman, so I detest him. But, there we go.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I have problems with my response...
Anything to add, mate?
Sorry,
no, nothing from me.
Carry on, Aya.
I was going to say, I mean, my ultimate thing is, and what's disappointing is that I was listening to getting people through like the replies and everything, and it's like, it was unnecessary and everything, but it's kind of like I just wanted to scream it, like, yeah, but we lost the empire, we lost like the prestige of Britain. I mean, we lost Britain in that. It's like, okay, you could talk about the sort of the democratic this or the Germans and this and the the boundaries of Europe and this. And I was like, okay, cool, whatever. But we lost Britain. We fucking lost Britain, and we got invaded by, the remnants of the colonies that were encouraged to come here, again by the same people who wanted us out of our colonies. I mean, it's just like, I mean that is the real tragedy. I mean, like, okay, yes, the war and Dresden and everything. I mean, that we still harp on about, and they did, and the people in the comments did, and it's like, I get that, but the real losers here, come on. I mean, it's like we lost Britain, and also it
100%.
and millions of British people were gaslit into, as you would say, they were gaslit into basically having their own memory of the war being revised. Again, a very good Adam Curtis documentary on the memory of the war. I can't remember. I think it was around. I remember that I think it was something to do with Nuremberg trials, but they did the interview of veterans and everything, and it's like how their memory of the war was different from what was like in popular culture and media. And like,
these days we fought the war. These days we fought the war to stop 6 million guerrillan people having something nasty done to them, which was never mentioned in World War II ever. It's a complete lie. But there we go.
Yeah.
No, the whole thing is a complete lie.
Here's a good one. Here's a good one. I when we talk about the Roman, like particularly the Western Roman Empire during late antiquity, I mean, would we say like Orestes, like the sort of the sort of regent for the young Romulus Augustus, technically the last Western Roman emperor, like his father Orestes, would we describe him as like the greatest Roman for like losing the Western Roman Empire? I mean, would we describe him as the greatest Roman? I mean, that's mental. That's a mental thing to say, right? Obvious reasons.
Good one, anyway. Good one, anyway. Yeah, he was not exactly Augustus, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so why would we say it now? I mean, stands to reason, right?
Yeah, no, it's nonsense. I mean, I listen. All of the history that you can actually go and read shows that Winston Churchill did more than any other single man of any nation to destroy the British Empire. He did. He just did. And only morons are now still arguing that that's.
And also, true. I mean,
really,
and again, Richard Hilton, his whole thing about it is because you had these lying Machiavellian actors who came in the interwar period who were replacing the old imperial elite running the show in the empire, who would basically bribe and borrow and not and basically steal in their positions in the empire. You had these new types of these Brits who were from a different generation and different class, who were untrustworthy and did create animosity within the empire. And then when it was time to go, many like in Nigeria and parts of India, you had begging them the Brits not to leave, and it created mass. I mean, like in India, millions were killed. Millions were killed in ethnic violence because because of the power vacuum.
Oh yeah.
So it's not to forget like this there wasn't a peaceful transition of like decolonization. I mean, millions of people were killed, countless civil wars and coups. I mean, it was terrible. In many ways, it was probably. I mean, you talk about the collapse of Western Roman Empire. I don't think the collapse of Western Roman Empire was that violent on the scale on that sort of scale. I mean, you had like a couple battles and that was it, but not on like total populations being removed.
Died, for sure.
Yeah, on the proportional level, definitely.
I think less people died for sure. All right, guys, we've been going over 2 hours. I'm just going to go around here clockwise. Mitch, anything, final words or anything you want to promote?
Not for me. The only topic we forgot to mention was Lauren Chen over in America getting accused of Russia ties, but there's not really much to be said about it other than.
Well, if you want to talk about that briefly, mate, we can.
All I would say is it's not been done for reasons relating to Trump because Lauren Chen has been anti-Trump, so that's the only thing I've got to say about it.
Yep.
Really short term.
Yeah, that's true. Anybody else got any comments on that?
I mean, to be honest, those sorts of channels, I just view them as like ragey bait slop channels, to be honest. So I don't know much about them. I mean, if they're Russian, okay, cool. If they're Chinese, okay, cool. If they're Israeli, okay, cool. Whatever. I don't care.
Yeah, I had to go and have a look because I was kind of sitting there thinking, I'm sure like Lauren Chen has never commented on like Russia particularly that hard, and she does a lot of videos, but apparently she doesn't really cover it that much.
And then they were talking about the guy with the beanie.
Tim Pool. Yeah.
Tim Paul, and they were talking about the gay guy who bought a baby from Ukraine with his gay friend Dave Rubin, and as somebody, I think it might have been the Franklin said on Twitter, no one from the real right watches those people or ever has really. It's just like I've never watched it. To my for many years anyway. So
to my eternal shame, Iron Duke, to my eternal shame, Dave Rubin did retweet a Twitter post many years ago. It was a terrible time indeed.
I can't trust a gay guy. I can't trust a gay guy who buys a baby from Ukraine with his male, whatever they call them. I just can't. Oh, and Lauren Southern, people are saying, and Lauren Southern is another very dubious person who I think married some Australian federal police guy. Very dubious. I'm being kind.
No, fuck it. Fuck it. We're not being kind. Let's just say it as it is. She got knocked up by some brown and had a mixed race kid and then hit the wall. I mean, that's all that's ever happened in her life, for God's sake. I mean, but
the point is, I think she married an Australian federal policeman, actually. But anyway, forget that. Don't worry.
Australian, you mean Aboriginal?
I am in Australia, so I might be slightly more accurate than you on that one. I don't know what he was, mate. I've got no idea.
Well, going off what people say about the baby,
maybe he might have been.
Probably might have been Aboriginal.
Yeah, might be.
Yeah.
Might be.
Yeah,
might be. I'm not saying a word.
Yeah, just take the baby to a petrol station and you'll find out.
Rama. Okay. All right. We've got to be careful, guys. We're on YouTube. All right. All right. Anything you wanted to promote, Mitch?
Not for me now.
Adamant, anything you wanted to promote?
No, nothing from me.
AI, anything you wanted to promote?
Part of my channel, AI Shiatori, and also I'm going to be if people go to Hitman's channel, that's the he does like sort of historical streams. He's been on a few other streams in our circles, and I'm going to be on a stream with him at 9:00 on Tuesday. So it's a new series, it's a new show. 9:00 Tuesday on his channel, which is
We losing?
All right. Before we finish, I need to check our.
Oh, sorry, I'm back now. I'm back.
Entropy
Sorry, Iron Duke.
Sorry, you carry on.
Yeah, sorry. It's on the Hitman's channel at 9 o'clock on Tuesday. I'll be appearing. It's a new series that he's got going, and it's called Archival Discord, and it's basically we talk about essays, articles, and I'm going to be on with him, Yiz the Eunuch, and there's an other American content creator who I cannot recall the name. I don't recognize the name, but seems to be a stand-up sort of person. So that's going to be 9 o'clock on Tuesday. That'll be covering the old unpopular opinion slots. Many are trying to take the crown of that the old UO slot. So hopefully this one will be a worth one to check out. And I've streamed with Hitman
people
before.
have told me to do that. I'm not going to do it, but
no, it sort of messes with your time of day and all that, I imagine. And
no, it's not that AI. The reason I won't do it is I am almost sure, almost that AA will not keep this up because video content gets far less. People take far less notice of it. You get far less views.
Yeah, I don't. To be honest, I don't think.
I just don't see him giving it up for very long. I really don't. I don't want to seem like a vulture. That seems a bad idea to me, especially for us Anglo-Saxon, Western right-wing people. But also, I just don't think AA is going to keep this up for very long because pre-made video content doesn't get all that much traction. And I think he's soon going to get bored with like doing 1 hour stream a week, which is what he's talking about doing. I think if you like streams, come and watch us by all means, but I ain't going to change my streaming time just because AA has decided to go from 3 streams a week to 1, because I don't think he will keep it up for very long. It's not going to be as popular as he thinks it is.
Maybe not, but we're going to be streaming at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday now, and with Hitman, and we did a stream with him a few months ago, I think, maybe several months ago now, and it was on Alexander the Great. So it's going to be pretty good content from that.
Oh yeah, go and check it out, guys. I'm not suggesting you don't go and check your content out there. I mean, I'm just saying I don't think AA is going to keep to this new schedule for very long. But that's just me, and I may be totally wrong. We'll see.
I didn't know. I think it's something to do with like family life. So who knows? Maybe he won't. Maybe like
we have some super chats to answer as well. By the way, guys, before we go.
Cool.
All right. First one is I've got to try and pronounce these now. The first one.
Oh, you're roboting a bit there. Oh, I think.
Well, that's your time in the South African military. Okay. Well, this is basically aimed at the big one for me. I didn't totally succeed in that.
Who said it? Because you roboted a bit there.
Sheev Palpacringe.
Right.
You may know who that is, and I feel. But since it was aimed at me, mostly not getting shot, but I didn't do very well at that because eventually I did get moderately badly wounded. But anyway, I took that lesson away.
Well, what did the chat say?
I think he said, "What lessons did I take away from my time in Northern Ireland that I took to my time in the South African military?" And that was my answer. Don't get shot. Margraf for USD $10 says, "Can it simply be accepted that the winners of World War II were the USA and the USSR? The losers were Europe. No one needs to be a German, Nazi, anti-British traitor to grasp that. Germany expanded too much and England had to respond." I would say the first part of that is entirely true. The second part is not, because Germany expanded too much and England had to respond.
Well, I was just going to say, I've heard this comment made. It was made in my replies as well, that actually, there was like, the Germans were expanding quickly, and it's like, okay, fine, yes, you had Sudetenland and what have you, but at the same token, those people, the people in the British establishment who lived through that, if you're going about that argument, what about the rise of Bolshevik-backed revolutionary movements in Europe, where literally every country had some sort of communist movement or communist revolution, or like in Spain's case, where you had direct communist Soviet-backed backing within the revolutionary movement. And so, I mean, if you're arguing on that sort of scope and scale argument, well, again, it goes back to the Bolsheviks. They were larger in scope and threat in the interwar period than any of, like, the sort of National Socialists or the Italian fascist movements by a mile, by a huge mile.
Yeah, for sure. I don't disagree with that.
I mean, even America had like communist and anarchist bombings and terror attacks.
Yeah, absolutely. You're entirely correct. But to answer Margraf's question, Germany expanded too much and England had to respond. Like, Germany gaining the tiny number of Polish dockyards wouldn't have made any difference whatsoever, just as Germany gaining the much bigger number of French dockyards made no difference whatsoever. The British could always outbuild Germany in terms of warships and stuff. So, yeah, don't agree with that, really, is my answer. The next one is from Sheev Palpacringe for USD $10. Fun fact, I remembered my granddad said he was transferred from the army to the navy to do the Arctic convoys. They even postponed the surgery he was going to have, and he even remarked upon people entering those ships, some of them being quite inexperienced or even rushed. Liked them myself. Yeah, sounds fine. I mean, like, quite a lot of British anti-aircraft army gunners were transferred to merchant ships on the Arctic convoys, because the Arctic convoys faced not only German U-boats, but they also faced a lot of German aircraft, and on occasion, German surface ships. So yeah, fine, mate. Good on your granddad. Nothing. I've got nothing bad to say about the people who fought World War II on the British side. I mean, they were just carrying out their orders, basically. Last one. She, Papa Cringe again. The extra fact the Soviet Union gave medals to those who participated in the Arctic convoys, but Britain never even bothered giving out medals. The Brits are known for not giving lots of medals. Like, you know, you can find American soldiers with 15 medals on, and all they ever did was go from the USA to Germany. I've got one British medal, which is the Northern Ireland General Service Medal. So, you know, the Brits just don't give out medals very much. Anyone got anything to say on any of those super chats? Thank you very much for the super chats, by the way. The support is much appreciated.
I mean, I've just picked up my grandfather's medals here, and he's got, well, there's 4. You got the Burma Star.
That's a good one. That's a good medal.
And you got there's two King George ones. There's one with a crown and there's one without a crown. Don't know what that means.
Yeah, there'll be the victory medal, and
yeah.
Burma Star's a good medal to have.
There's
two against the Japanese.
Yeah, 2 Burma Stars actually.
One of them must be slightly different because you didn't get to. But yeah.
Yes. Oh, actually, hold on a sec. One's the 39 to 45 star, and the other one is just. Oh, that's strange. I don't know. One says the. Oh, I think that's the World War II. Actually, that might be the World War II one. Oh, don't worry.
The victory medal, yeah.
Yeah, the victory medal, yeah. That's what it's referred. Okay,
yeah. I mean,
it was like at the end of World War One, everyone got.
Yeah, I didn't get that last part. You were roboting a little bit. Still going. Getting a new computer. That's the only reason. Oh, you're back.
I have them. Any final?
Nope.
No.
All right, I'm going to take that as we will quit for this evening. Guys, if you want to subscribe to Horus's Substack, that will be in the description of the video later on, as will a link to AI's YouTube channel. Go well. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for the super chats, guys, as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for the super chat, guys, because we don't get many on this channel.
And if people could like and subscribe as well to tickle the algo.
That's always good. Thank you.
And hit that notification bell. Hit that notification bell.
Yeah. You got to say all notifications, because otherwise, like, YouTube does not promote this channel because we're not what YouTube likes. You know?
Yeah, really, subscribing on its own does nothing. You need to hit the like, subscribe, hit the bell, put a comment.
Yeah,
smash that like button.
You guys are starting to take this now. All right. Okay. I'm not very good at promotion, guys. All right. But yeah, absolutely. Everything the guys said is absolutely true. Many thanks to my guests, Horus, Alaman, Mitch, and AI. And we'll see you next week. In the meantime, don't let the bastards grind you down.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Now I gotta wait while my computer fires up the next screen. Funny. Sue. I'll be able to exit the screen. There you go. Okay, I think we're on. I think the stream's ended.
It still says live on my end.
Oh.